You work so hard to install, to configure this beautiful UCS system. You certainly don't want all that work to go to waste if there is some major failure. In this nugget, we'll look at the Unified Computing System Manager backup and restore process. And you'll see how you can even export ingredients that you've worked so hard on in your UCS implementation and then import those into another system to save yourself some time and effort. It's an action-packed nugget. Let's get started. Now, the first point I want to remind you about is remember everything's being stored regarding the UCS system in that nice, convenient XML. This is going to be excellent for backup and restore efficiencies. You can be in a real complex data center environment, and you're going to find that the backup and restore process is marvelously efficient. Now, I want to warn you up front, there's going to be 4 options for backup that you're going to need to master with me today, and there's going to be 2 options for restore that you're going to need to master. Okay, so again, flashcards, watching this video twice, do whatever you need to do to make sure you're armed and prepared in your certification environment. As you might guess, I'm also going to share the ability to automate the process. In other words, oftentimes students come to me and they say, look, Anthony, I want to sleep easy at night. I want to know that every night at, let's say, 1 a.m., my UCS implementation is fully backed up so that I could restore it in the event of an emergency, and I don't want to have to manually do anything about that. We'll, of course, show you how that gets done. So let's launch in and let's start with the different backup types that we have. Let's make sure you fully understand these different options for backup. So when I mentioned to you a backup of the UCS manager, right? A backup of all this important configuration that you have in your UCS manager, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking about what's called a full state backup. Remember I told you there was 4 types of backups? Well, yeah, you're naturally thinking of the full state backup. Let me show you where that is. We go over to the admin tab and notice right here we have the all selected for all admin, if you will. And notice on the general tab here we have actions and we say backup configuration. And this window pops up and we say, look, we want to create a backup operation. I want to enable this and I want to do a full state backup. What are we backing up? We're backing up everything, a complete binary dump of the database. We're going to back up all of your configuration, all of the things that we'll be working on together throughout this course, like all of your server pools and all of your profiles and all of your policies, everything, all of your logical configurations, all of your system configurations, all of it. This full state backup will back up even the state and statuses of certain components, of the components that you're utilizing in the UCS system. This is a wonderful option, obviously, this complete full state backup for when you're about to like upgrade the UCS, right? Because this would enable you to roll back to just where you were before you started, messing around with major upgrades. Keep in mind, this full state backup is going to go stale, right? Pretty quickly, because as associations, as information changes in your UCS system, this will be, just rendered a bit stale. Also keep in mind that we're not going to have flexibility on manipulating this full state backup at all. We're stuck with it in its, in that moment in time, right? It's your UCS configuration, all of it, its statuses, everything for just that moment in time, and we don't modify it. How would we restore it? We restore it by doing a complete configuration wipe of the UCS system, applying this full state backup, and rebooting the UCS system. So, this is the full state backup operation. Notice it's one of four. There's an all configuration, a system config, and a logical config that I'll be describing in a moment. But right now, our focus is on what you would really think about for a backup operation, and that's a full state backup. Notice we can back this particular information up to a remote file system or a local file system. And for those of you interested in certification, please memorize the protocols that you have available to you. You can file transfer protocol it remotely. You can TFTP it, secure copy protocol, secure FTP protocol. Those are our options for remote file systems. Obviously, if we're going to the local file system, we just browse for a particular location and store it there. So, the full state backup, you're educated on it now, and you could trigger it by coming in to this particular location that we're in. But for the longest time, something that you'll see everyone complaining about if you go up on the Google and you search, UCS backup automation, you're going to see everybody complaining about previous versions of the UCS manager that didn't allow any scheduling of this particular backup. Let's see how easy it is to do that. I'm going to cancel out of this window where we were triggering a full state backup, and I'm going to show you the scheduling feature they added in now. Notice we're on admin. We've got all selected. Instead of the general tab, though, look at this. Policy, backup, and export. We can do a backup policy, and notice we can schedule it. So you can have this full backup done daily, weekly, or bi-weekly with the built-in scheduling feature. So finally, we can add automation built right in to UCS Manager. What administrators did in previous versions of the UCS is they created their own automation through scripts and all kinds of things like that. But finally, we've got some automation built right in. So now let's turn our attention to your other types of backup. We said there was 4 types of backup. Well, if we go back to the General tab and I go Backup Configuration again and I say Create Backup Operation and we go back into this window, we see something interesting. There's an All configuration, a System configuration, and a Logical configuration option. What's going on here? Well, obviously, all config includes both system and logical. So all we really need to define for you is what is the system configuration versus what is the logical configuration. Well, the system configuration is all configuration that specifically pertains to things like AAA, role-based access control, the user database, the particular unified computing system configuration of that system itself. Okay. The logical configuration refers to things like service profiles, templates, our VLAN and our vSAN configuration, our organizations and our locales that we may have configured. Okay, this makes sense, doesn't it? Notice if we choose to back up all of that configuration, then we get both the AAA stuff in the system configuration and all those logical configuration elements too. Now, notice that our options are the same for these as far as backing them up remotely using our various remote protocols or backing them up utilizing the local file system. There is a huge difference in the all configuration, system config, and logical config backups from the full state backup. And that huge difference is the fact that these XML backups can be edited. So you could do a really clever thing. You could back up, let's say, your logical configuration or your system configuration, and you could go into that XML file that gets backed up and you could manipulate it. You could change it and then import it in a UCS system, maybe in another state, and you could go ahead and have that modified version imported. So these files, these exports, if you will allow you to very easily set up UCS systems with similar configurations. Now notice under the logical configuration, it has the option to preserve identities. There's an excellent explanation here of what this is all about. If preserve identities is selected, then virtual host bus adapters worldwide port names, virtual NIC MAC addresses, worldwide known names, universally unique IDs that are all pulled from pools are actually going to be preserved during your backup. So virtual identities that the UCS system has given out will literally be preserved during that backup state. Pretty cool. And obviously, we're going to get into those identities, and you'll understand those if you don't already when we move farther on in this particular course. So we have our 4 types of backups: full state, system config, logical config, or all config. Both of those combined into that 4th type of backup. Now, what about restores? Well, we have what we call a restore. What is the restore for? It's for the full state backup. And then we have an import. What is an import for? Well, it's for either system config or logical config or all configuration. Oh, man, we're making sense of this together, aren't we? Yeah, great work. So we've got 4 types of backups, and we fully understand those. And then we've got 2 types of restores, if you will. One we call a restore for the full state, and the other for configurations we call technically an import. So look, we need to walk through this process and make sure it all works, right? Remember, it's always critical in a non-production environment to test this stuff. Make sure you are completely familiar with your disaster recovery processes, because when disaster strikes, you want to have confidence in the whole process and your ability to carry it out. Quick test here. I went and created a test user account. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go up to the admin, all, and we're going to do a backup configuration. I'm going to create a new backup operation, and I'm just interested in the system configuration for this test, and we'll store it on the local file system. I've got a folder called temp, and we'll create the test file in temp. So I say OK, and it says, hey, there's already a test file in there. Do you want to overwrite it? Sure, I'll overwrite that test with this test. So we just did it. We had success here of a backup operation. What did we do? The system configuration. That should include the AAA information, that user account that we created called test. Now what we'll do is we'll cause a problem in our UCS system. I'm going to say OK here to close that window. I'm going to jump back to our particular user management area. We'll go into our user services. We will go ahead and select our test user account. We'll right click and we will delete that user account. If I save my changes, it says, okay, we did it. That user is gone. Well, do we have the system configuration backed up? Yes, we did that together. So let's go ahead and do the restore. You know what? Before we do that, I want to show you that particular file that we created called test. Let's go take a look at it. Here I've opened that in Notepad, and you can see it is indeed what I described it would be. It's XML. And you could go in and you could edit this XML to suit your particular purposes, especially when you want to automate the creation of things on another UCS system. So now, of course, what we want to do is we want to test an import. So I'll go back to my all and I'll do an import configuration, and I'll say, look, we want to create a new import operation. I want this to be enabled. I want to do a replace action, and we are pulling that file from our local file system, and it was temp, and its name was test. We say OK. It goes out, finds that file, imports it. We can say OK here, and now we'll check the results by going over to user services, and sure enough, our test user account is restored. So we've done a great job together in this nugget on backup and restore. There's really one last thing to talk about, and that is the true restore operation that we know is for our absolute full state backup. How is that done? Well, what you do is you go to the command line interface on the active fabric interconnect, and you do something that's really scary. You issue this command, erase configuration. Yeah, remember what we said with that full-blown restore, you're going to start from scratch. So we erase the configuration, and when it erases the config, it will automatically reboot. So that's not a command. I'm putting that in parentheses because that is not a command we utilize. It'll just automatically reboot. When it comes back up, it says, do you want to set up new or do you want to restore? So you will literally type the restore command at that prompt, and it will guide you through finding the restore, the backup, the full state backup file that you saved on the network. Pretty cool. So when we do the restore as opposed to an import, we are erasing the configuration on the active fabric interconnect. It will reboot, and then we are typing the restore command, and we're navigating to that full backup that we created. Well, let's take an exam time break together, shall we, in order to wrap up this important nugget. So here we go. Your UCS upgrade failed, and now data center components are reporting errors. Yikes, this sounds like a really bad day. What component do you need in order to perform a system restore? Is that the logical configuration, the system configuration, incremental, all configuration, or full state? Our exam strategy here is straightforward. First, we find the 4 backup options we talked about that actually exist. They would be logical configuration, system configuration, all configuration, and full state. Now, what would we do to perform a restore? Well, remember, on these configuration XML files, we are actually doing what's called an import. There is only one that we do a restore of, and that is our answer full state. Remember, we go to our Fabric Interconnect, erase our UCS configuration, and do a restore of this full state file. Awesome work on this nugget. Reach up, reach back, pat yourself on the back. Awesome, awesome work. I hope this nugget has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.